Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you are having a good time. Why is a white woman madly in love with the black man who lives around the corner? It is a fascinating, dramatic and human story, which reflects the challenges faced by any type of intimate relationship, marital or concubinage, and even worse when we talked about a white woman being unfaithful to her husband with a black man during racial segregation. Type of intimate relationship, which was considered prohibited morally, socially condemned and criminalized by the laws of anti-racial miscegenation between a black man and a white woman during the Jim Crow laws in the USA. The worst of all is that this story of infidelity between a white woman and a black man occurred in one of the most anti-black slave states, as was Georgia, where the social norms of the Black Code were rigorously applied under the motto, equal but separate. Historically, all white and blacks Americans know that under these laws and norms of anti-black behavior during racial segregation, blacks and whites were prohibited from having any type of social interaction, and let's not talk about a marital relationship between both racial groups. As a result of the laws against racial miscegenation, a person does not care about the group racial or social hierarchy if found to be part of this type of prohibited relationship. Both the black man and the white woman could go to jail. My name is Barbara, I am 30 years old. My husband's name is Stephen, he is 35 years old and works as a law enforcement officer. Between my husband and who, when telling this story, we have two boys. One is 9 years old named Kevin and the youngest is 5 years old named Michael. We live in Cabbagetown in the eastern part of the city of Atlanta in Georgia, in an area considered poor due to the enormous number of blacks who live in the segregated neighborhoods on the edge of the city. Some say the area where the most blacks live is the Fulton area. But I do not believe it. Let's continue developing this story. Everyone knows that after the Civil War between the northern states and the pro-slavery southern states, many black people began to migrate to Atlanta through the low cost of renting houses compared to other states. As a result of the high cost of rent, many blacks live segregated in the cities of Jenningstown, Shermantown, and Summerhill, where many of them live in conditions of extreme poverty. We all know that Jim Crow laws were implemented after the race riots in Atlanta in 1906. As a result of the imposition of these laws, the use of bars, parks, many neighborhoods, prisons, law enforcement officers, like my husband's case, his job, apart from pursuing crime. He was also forced to enforce anti-black laws, something my husband hated to do, and let's not talk about when he had to patrol those black neighborhoods. Another aspect that we must consider that public toilets, schools and public transport trans-o trolley car were also segregated by racial groups. To understand the central plot of this story, we must accept that black people were seen and treated less than human, often as second-class citizens. As a white person, when you boarded city trams, as I do, white people sat in the front seats and black people sat in the back. When the tram is full of passengers, black people, whether men, women and the elderly, have to give up their seats to white people. In this dramatic story that I am telling you right now, using the trolley car as a means of transportation to secretly meet my black lover, could be considered the focus of this story of infidelity between a white woman and a black man during racial segregation in the United States. This is a kind of passionate story, full of deceit, lies and emotional abuse of a woman who spent moments of pleasure with a black man and couldn't stop thinking about him. It was something that consumed her mentally and created a certain nervousness in her, because she was cheating on her husband with a black man who lives around the corner, and what would happen if her husband discovers the infidelity. Don't have the slightest doubt. That obsession after a moment of pleasure with a black man was destroying life in every way. That I had fought as a woman, but also as a wife and mother of 2 children. How did this story really begin? About a white woman's infidelity with a man in a type of forbidden passionate relationship? What were the reasons why that a woman like me, a mother of 2 children, cheats on her husband with another man? What was my husband's reaction when he found out that I was cheating on him with another man? How did it all end? These are some of the questions that I will try to answer when I tell you this story, in which I was cheating on my husband with a black man who valued what I could offer as a person, as a mother, but also as a woman. When you are a housewife and mother of 2 small children, who lives financially in a difficult situation due to the low salary of a police officer working for the city. Believe me, I had to do everything possible to feed the children, pay the rent where we live, keep them warm during the winter. But the worst thing about our situation was the constant drunkenness of my husband, who sometimes, despite my fights every night, when he came home from patrol on the streets, I could smell the cheap perfume of the prostitute women my husband slept with sometimes, when they did some kind of raid on the brothels full of prostitutes by seizing prohibited drinks or responding to neighborhood complaints about the indecent acts of patrons, the loud sound of music, but also to dissipate disputes when a drunk was out of control. Let's also talk about when a police officer found a prostitute wandering the streets selling her services as a cheerful street woman, who sometimes offered her body for a cigarette or a bottle of alcohol in any dark corner of the city. My husband is a man with a strong, aggressive and abusive temperament, emotionally, in the way he treats the children and the woman who is telling you this story. If my husband mistreats me when he is sober, blaming me for all his problems, doing a type of job he hates, you can imagine how he behaves when he's drunk. I don't know why, but my husband loses his temper, physically and verbally abusing me, accusing me of being a woman worse than a street prostitute. He does not care how the children feel when they look at his father, mercilessly beating his mother, because he didn't like the kind of food she was putting on the table at that moment. Many times before my husband's physical and verbal abuse, I have to spend the night at the neighbor's house to avoid insults from my husband, but also the physical aggression to which he has accustomed me, a type of violence that I have reported, but many of them only tell me that they can do nothing because my husband is a police officer just like them, that I, as a policewoman, had to understand the type of dangerous and stressful work that my husband did protecting hardworking and honest citizens from the criminals who prowl the city. In short, they couldn't do anything to change the situation of abuse and mistreatment to which I was being subjected by my husband. A man who made me feel like the most miserable woman in the world, who was worthless to him. But, despite being an abused wife, I had to be an emotionally strong woman for the mental health of my children. And yes, as a mother, I had to endure the abuse from their father so that, within the poverty we lived in, they would have a roof over their heads, hot food prepared by their mother, but also love, protection and care from who is telling you this story. It was something I had to do. I was the kind of mother who would make any kind of sacrifice to see her children smile. As you know how important it is for a child to celebrate his birthday with his friends from the neighborhood. Kevin, my oldest son, would turn 10 years old in the next few months, which was important to him. I, as a mother, could see in the shine of his eyes the excitement and the importance of this celebration for him, reasons why as a mother, despite our economic limitations as a humble family, we had to make a sacrifice and buy him his first suit. A black friend who lived in the same neighborhood recommended a black tailor who made suits for children and adults at a reasonable price that I could pay in installments. To get to the place where it was located, I had to take the tram, and when I got to the city center, I had to stop at the first stop when the tram will turn left. Accompanied by Kevin, my son got off the tram, and walking several blocks we arrived at a small men's store. We rang the doorbell, and a black man, extremely courteous, wearing one of those suits for rich white gentlemen who could only afford that type of businessman's high society gentleman's suit, in a tone friendly, making me feel like a high society lady, asking me in a soft tone, "My lady, how can I serve you?" "My name is Barbara. This is my oldest son Kevin. In the next few months he will turn 10 years old, and I would like to celebrate him by buying him his first outfit." One neighbor who lives in the same neighborhood where we live told me about the type of work you offer, and I would like to use her services as a tailor to make an elegant suit for my child at a price we can afford. He answered me, in a friendly tone, that the cost of the work will depend on the type of material used and the style of suit I choose. Afterwards he showed me a large book containing the designs and colors of the most popular costumes used by children and teenagers, and he asked me to follow him to a small warehouse in the room behind the store, where there were 2 or 3 cooking machines, foundations of bread cones and that type of steam iron that was used to iron suits. With a gentle glance at me, he showed me several bolts of fabric for a dress suit that he had available at that moment. Without realizing it, he took my hand so that I could appreciate the softness of the fabric. His behavior towards me, which I felt at that moment, a type of sensation that as a woman, I had not felt with my husband, much less with other men, and more when we talk about a black man, who was prohibited from touching any part of a white woman's body. It does not matter if she consented or not. But in that moment, this gesture of affection towards me was not something that bothered me. On the contrary, it made me feel like an important woman, flattered and respected. He asked me to touch the fabric to tell me about the quality, but also the smoothness and type of texture. When he was showing me the various types of fabric, he also told me that the price of the work was based on the style of elegant suit, which I wanted. After several minutes of conversation about the price and payment method, he began to take the measurements of the jacket and pants of my son Kevin, who looked excited and full of enthusiasm to wear a type of masculine suit, which was only reserved for men and rich boys. I'm not going to lie to you, I haven't seen my son Kevin so excited in a long time. Which made me cry inside for having provided him as a mother, for such a happy moment for my son. After some discussion about price, we came to a payment agreement. As a requirement to begin the work of making my son Kevin's formal suit, he asked me for an advance, which was reasonable, which I accepted. He gave me a written receipt where I was able to find out the name of this black man, who, I'm not going to lie to you, I was extremely impressed by the treatment, style, sophisticated dress, talent, and let's not talk about how attractive he is as a man. His name is Christopher, which, without realizing it, I felt enormous joy in that moment. I don't know if it was doing something that would change my son's life or meeting a man as fascinating as Christopher. What I can tell you is that I felt extremely happy as a woman, and I did not know the real reason for this feeling of joy in me, until much later. The trip back home, from the central part of the city, where all the businesses were, to the suburban area where I live, was endless when I was thinking about how much I was impressed by the black man who lives around the corner at the first tram stop, via downtown Atlanta. Whether it is a product of admiration for the great talent he has as a tailor, or perhaps because how sophisticated, educated and attractive he is. Sometimes in a low voice, he would ask myself, why did my husband not have the politeness, kindness, soft tone of voice and the attention of a man like Christopher? But one of the questions, which creates some concern in me, as a mother of 2 children and a married woman, is, why am I thinking so much about this black man, who I barely know? I really don't know the answers, and it makes me nervous to know the answers. When I got home, for a long time, I stayed silent inside my thoughts, looking at fantastic images, making love with someone forbidden, thinking about the black man who has his business around the corner at the first stop on the streetcar heading downtown. A black man who only looks at me as another client who pays for his services. Unconsciously, I stood in front of the mirror. I cleaned my face, arranged my hair in a different way and smiled to myself, as if confessing a secret that no one knows, only the one who is telling this story. There was such an impression that Christopher made on me, a white woman like myself, who considered herself emotionally empty inside due to the emotional abuse of my husband, often without the desire to live, who now feels like a teenage girl in love with that type of boy that she knows that he will never be with her. But it's the kind of day I dream that a woman like me needs to forget, or escape even for a moment, the abuse of a husband who treats me worse than the prostitutes he locks up in jail and his children when he's drunk. Simply, he, as a man, is unattainable for a white woman like me, because socially he is considered less than another man for having a different skin color, and everything is a product of the ideas that some white people have of feeling superior to black people, imposing on all of us the laws of Jim Crow, a type of belief of superiority, which does not exist in me, and even more so now that a black man is controlling my heart at this moment, awakening feelings in me. I thought they had died. But as a married woman, with 2 small children, who need me, and an abusive and controlling husband, it is the type of adolescent dreams that I cannot afford to harbor in my mind, much less in my heart, because this type of interracial relationship between a white woman and a black man, it is forbidden. But, even though I try to convince myself that a woman like me can never be with a black man like Christopher, the fantasy images of a teenager in love, they remained persistently in my mind, even when I tried to suppress it, creating different scenes in my life, where anything is possible. Where I could spend a moment of passion with a black man, in a type of forbidden relationship, where only he and I were the only witnesses. Sometimes I judge myself so harshly, for cheating on my husband in my dreams, in every erotic image, making love with another man, that even if it's only in my mind, for a woman like me, you cannot be unfaithful to your husband. Not even in thought, if you consider yourself a Christian woman. But, it is something that my body and my heart don't care about at this moment, and those erotic images continue to arise in me, where I'm spending a moment of passion with the wrong man, not because that man is black, but because I'm a married woman, mother of 2 children, condemned to emotional loneliness for living with a husband, who cares least about how I behave as a woman. This black man, who is keeping me awake every night and disturbing every fiber of my body, may have his wife and children who depend on him, the love of their father, understanding and support in their emotional and material needs. In short, it is possible that the heart of the man I am thinking of belongs to another woman, who is not the woman who is telling you this forbidden story. But as long as I'm daydreaming about a forbidden romance, I don't just exists in my mind, I am not hurting anyone, not even the memory of a husband who abused me verbally and emotionally when things did not go his way either. He gets drunk to forget the frustrations of a job as a police officer that he despises, in a society in which he lives by the motto equal, but separate. Am I really in love with Christopher, or is it just an infatuation of a white woman who has never been with a man other than her husband, and even more so when that man is he black? Let me tell you, that right now I do not want to know the answer to that question, so as not to break the joy that is in my soul, thinking about someone forbidden, as is the black man who lives around the corner. I only know that what makes me happy at this moment is having that almost obsessive desire to think about him, someone who, like woman, he does not know if I exist, and my presence does not occupy a place in his thoughts, as he does in mine. A type of illusion about a man, which is only reserved for a teenage girl. Many times, my husband, when I am preparing food, when he looks at the smile on my face, asks me, what is the reason for the happiness that exists in me? Sometimes I respond, I am happy to celebrate Kelvin's 10 years. My husband always answers me, you know that I don't agree with spending so much money on a dress suit, for a snotty boy, who doesn't know what it costs to get money these days. But he can't imagine, my happiness is not really for Kelvin's birthday, it's because in the next week I will see Christopher once when I go to pay the remaining money that we must pay for the cost from Kelvin's dress suit. Believe me what I'm saying. Only I know the desire I have to get on the tram to visit that black man who lives around the corner, trying live the fantasy of an illusory love as a teenager in love with a forbidden love between a white woman and a black man. Type of romantic relationship that has never been it, or has been and will be told in a dramatic novel, because this type of relationship is prohibited, much less talking about it. Why is the attractive or erotica image of a black man controlling my thoughts? Could it be that this black man awakened in me hidden desires for masculine affection, which have I always had to be loved, reciprocated and pleased in bed? Just thinking about it, believe me, it produces mixed feelings in me that I cannot describe in this moment. Could it be that, a white woman like me during racial segregation, am in love with a black man who lives around the corner in a forbidden relationship? What will be my husband's reaction if he finds out that I am in love or am cheating on him with a black man? Would a black man like Christopher risk his life and the freedom to be with a woman like me, a mother of 2 children? In the next chapter, you will learn each of these answers. Ladies and gentlemen, if you made it this far, thank you very much for your attention.